It is now time for our weekly political segment, Texas Face Off. Joining us this morning is Tara Pohlmeyer, Communications Director for Progress Texas, and Matt Mackowiak, who is the chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
So we just heard from Kate Shaw, who was talking about the impeachment inquiry of President Donald Trump. The hearing's set to start tomorrow. We'll also have hearings Friday. And the Texas Tribune and University of Texas teamed up to do some polling of Texans in October. And they came out and saw that a lot of people, a lot of Texans actually agree that these investigations of the president are necessary. 46% saying yes, 42% saying no, but you have, an equal amount of people who are unsure or have no opinion on this. Tara, we're going to start with you about whether or not what the president is accused of doing rises to the severity of an impeachment probe. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. When I think of this, it kind of takes me back to middle school history class when we talk about checks and balances and how this is really Congress's job to kind of check the president on this and make sure that he hasn't broken the law, that he hasn't done anything really unlawful. And so when we move forward through this inquiry and through this process, we'll see bits of information come out. And we were talking that this is a really historical moment for our times here. And so I think a lot of Texans will be watching, a lot of Texans will be following, getting updates on social media and from their television stations. But we know that Congress should investigate. A lot of Texans agree, and I think Texans deserve to know where folks like Chip Roy, Roger Williams, John Cornyn, and Ted Cruz stand on this. We don't need lawmakers that blindly follow Trump. We need lawmakers that are committed to this search for truth and justice, and that's what we're trying to do with this impeachment inquiry.
Matt, some of the narrative that we're starting to hear from some Republicans in Congress is that, yes, what the president did was inappropriate, but it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so, I'd start by saying that it's one thing to say you're in favor of the inquiry on impeachment. It's another to say you're in favor of impeachment. And there's absolutely no evidence at this stage that a majority of the country or a majority of Texans support impeachment. We're still in the early stage here. This last 6 weeks has been a private, secret process where leaks have been how people have learned information. Congress and the American people have not been able to see much of what's been transpiring. We are entering a public phase now. Look, I think there's a good chunk of Republicans who think the president did nothing wrong. I think there's a smaller chunk of Republicans and perhaps independents who think that even mentioning the Bidens on one of the calls later in the call was inappropriate but not impeachable. And then I think there's hardcore Democrats that want to impeach the president. So ultimately, public opinion is going to determine this. Keep in mind, when an impeachment inquiry vote was held in the House against Bill Clinton, you had 30 Democrats join with every Republican to support that inquiry. In this case, you had 0 Republicans. So you asked where Roger Williams and Chip Roy. They were voting no on the inquiry. If you're voting no on the inquiry, you're going to vote no on impeachment. That was the easier political vote to cast. So we'll see where the story heads. I'm interested over the next few weeks to see what the facts are and what the facts are on both sides. Instead of Democrats leaking facts or testimony, you're now going to have these witnesses testifying under oath in public, being asked questions by Republicans and Democrats. At this stage, we know that Ukraine did not know the aid was being withheld. It's very hard to have a quid pro quo when there's only one party who knows what the deal is. And we know that that ultimately this was, I think, a fairly minor aspect of the overall conversation the United States was having with Ukraine. There was a desire to root out corruption, but to do that focused on the 2016 election, looking backwards, not necessarily looking forward. So I don't think that this is going to really go anywhere. I do think House Democrats are going to ultimately impeach the president. I think they feel like they have to for their base. In the Senate, I believe he'll be acquitted because you need 20 Republican senators to join with every Democrat, and that's simply not going to happen.
So let's talk about that with the Democrats, because some see this as a really risky move, right? Especially as we head towards the 2020 election, that if you try to impeach the president and you failed, you are really going to voters are not going to take that well. You're going to really get Republican voters in that base riled up and ready to go out and vote, and the Democrats not so much. So what are your thoughts on whether or not this is a smart move?
No, I don't think it's smart. From their standpoint, from their perspective, they felt duty bound to pursue this. But look, I mean, there was a story, I believe it was in the Washington Post, the day after the election in 2016 saying Democrats are going to start trying to impeach Trump on day one. I mean, he's the only president in the history of the country who's been under investigation every single day of his first term, right? At some point, people have to step back and say, what is the purpose of all of this? You know, the Russia collusion delusion went nowhere. There were no facts there. There was no conspiracy, according to Mueller. That was so overreported and overhyped. And I think people see that and they look at Ukraine now and they say, where's the beef? What are the actual facts? What did he do wrong? There's absolutely no allegation that a crime was committed, certainly not a high crime. So, look, I think the risk for Democrats is what they're not breaking through on is whatever else they've been doing in Congress legislatively. Those things are not getting attention, they're not getting traction, and so most voters are going to see that the 2 years of majority control in the House for Democrats has been all about investigating President Trump, first on Russia and then on Ukraine. That doesn't affect anyone's day-to-day life, make their life better, and I think that's a cost that could be there for them.
Tara, I'm going to guess that you're going to say this is a smart move for Democrats. Tell us why.
Absolutely. So Democrats have an absolute obligation, and so does every member of Congress and every member of our U.S. Senate to search for this truth and to push forward with this impeachment inquiry. What we're seeing from all of our Republicans is that they are unwilling to kind of actually search for this truth, and they will be held accountable when it comes to 2020 and when they're up for re-election. What we have seen from Trump's campaign to now is this pattern of corruption. And when we look forward to 2020, we know that progressives have been building power in Texas for generations, and that we are at a tipping point here in Texas, and that there is so much coming up in 2020, and there's a lot of work to do. But I think this impeachment inquiry is a very small part of that, and is really just Democrats going forward with their duty to uphold our U.S. Constitution.
All right, well, we thank you both for being here today. We are out of time, but you guys can rewatch this interview on KVUE.com right after the newscast if you like. We'll be right back.